AfriKili family, Global Pack Nation, welcome to the Global Pack Show. On today's show, we'll talk about the sophomore U.S. Congresswoman from Texas, Jasmine Crockett, but also the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, who happens to be the youngest African leader. Well, both of them seem to increasingly divide public opinion. It seems like the more they are gaining popularity around the world, well, there are comments and everybody seems to have an opinion about them today. So really the question is, are they just a product of social media propaganda without any substance? Or are they real activists who can catalyze real meaningful change that will tangibly change the life of the Global Pack, the global Pan-African community, or the global Pan-African diaspora? Well, we'll discuss that and more on today's show. So let's fasten our seatbelts, let's dive in, and let's get to work. Family, always a pleasure for me to be in front of you. And today on this Thursday, May 15, 2025, thank you very much to all of you that are tuning in, all of you that are supporting this fairly new Global Pack Live concept. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for your shares. For those of you who have not done so, let me ask you to please consider clicking on the subscribe button. Only takes a second, but by doing that, you're helping us tremendously. You are helping this platform grow. You're allowing us to reach the objective that we've set for ourselves in 2025. And I have no doubt that we will achieve that. But more importantly, it allows you to be part of the dialogue, be part of this community, this growing community. But also, when you click and when you subscribe, click on that bell. Every time there's a new video that's coming in, you will be notified without necessarily a lot of efforts from you. So thank you ahead of time for that. All right, today's show will continue on the topic we have been discussing for quite a while, Ibrahim Traore and Jasmine Crockett. I gotta say, I did not project the kind of passion that these two individuals are eliciting, just to be quite frank. This is a fascinating development, in my opinion. Just seeing how these two individuals are essentially in every single media outlet, social media platform. So it seems like those two names today, Jasmine Crockett and Ibrahim Traore, when you mention those names, everybody has an opinion, positive or a negative. So that's kind of telling me that there's something that they're doing that must be right. I mean, like, really, you can't find anybody who will just not have an opinion. And I'm talking about strong opinions here. Either they totally dislike them, because they have some serious detractors that are saying that Jasmine Crockett is, there's no substance. It's all about attention seeking. She's not bringing any true change. When it's Ibrahim Traore, you have people saying, well, he's just a Russian puppet. He's somebody also who's benefiting from social media propaganda. There's nothing substantial on the ground. As a matter of fact, the conflict that he said he would improve, the conflict against terrorists in Burkina Faso, well, more people are dying than ever. So there's really no change. So the detractors are coming down on these two individuals. There are supporters on the other end. I mean, Jasmine Crockett, you'll hear people saying, yeah, she's standing on her 10 toes, which is one of the expressions she used, standing on her 10 toes. She's God sent. She's an angel. She's the change that we need. She's the kind of energy and voice that we need. When it comes to Ibrahim Traore, energy abound. You have people across the Pan-African diaspora, whether it's African American communities, whether it's in the Caribbean, different African countries, Latin America, people are supporting him, saying that, yeah, he's the kind of unifier that the global Pan-African world needs. So either way, as I said, it is strong emotion on one side. And when you reach that sort of level where your name by default just elicits all kind of dialogues and commentary and rebuke or things along those lines, that tells me you're certainly doing something wrong. So we will something right. I'm sorry. So we will discuss that today. And I have heard critic because I'm actually also flabbergasted when I see the sort of energy that the last video I made on Jasmine Crockett is eliciting. I mean, I'm seeing the likes, I'm seeing the shares, I'm seeing the comments, positive and negative. On that note, again, thank you very much for your support. And if you enjoy this sort of comments and this sort of content that we're creating, and you think that somebody else in your network might benefit from it, it's very simple, right? Just click on share, and from your cell phone, you can just send it to people in your network. And not only does it help the platform grow, but really the messaging that you like and you think others might benefit to it, it helps us spread that. But thank you for the support on that video. All right, so let's go into the topic. So really the question is, are these two individuals, are they like real activists, right? Are they real agents of change, like tangible agent of change? Or are they simply the beneficiary of this new age communication mechanism, social media and so on? Are they just benefiting from that, like communication campaign, social media strategies, and so on and so forth? I will break it down gradually. So my recommendation to you, so if you do not like Jasmine Crockett at all, still stay until the end, because I'm sure by the time we're done with this conversation, you will, if not alter your viewpoints, because that's really not the objective here, but you will gain some elements, I think, which might help you factor in your assessment of her. And obviously, if you like her, well, you're standing on the 10 toes, right? So no problem. So we'll go until the end. And same for Traore. If you're one of those who think that this young man isn't bringing anything, stay until the end. And if you're a supporter, then this is for you. So I think before we even start assessing if these individuals are real catalysts of change, they're real activists who can bring about change, it is important to define the term, because over time I've come to realize that many of the arguments we have, and you can do the same observation, many of the positions that people take, many a time it begins with a misunderstanding of just the sound definition of the problems, not even defining the terms appropriately. So people argue when in fact they argue about different things. So let's make sure we start on the same point of view. So what do I mean when I say that, or when I ask the question as to whether or not Jasmine Crockett and Ibrahim Traore are activists? So let's just go with this standard definition here. So when I'm talking about an activist, it is somebody who is active in campaigning for change, normally on a political or social issue. All right. So is Jasmine Crockett and is Ibrahim Traore, or are they people who are active in campaigning for change on political or social issues? I think if you go based on that definition, the answer can only be a yes. They are certainly campaigning for change. And in the case of Jasmine Crockett, if you follow her history, if you know her history, you would know that even before joining first the state legislature in the state of Texas, and then eventually going into U.S. Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives, even before that political career, she was certainly an activist. She's somebody who took upon many cases for, Black Lives Matter activists and so on. So she's somebody who's out there advocating for change. And you can also not say that she is all fluff, because she's somebody who has introduced a lot of legislation. Whether it is when she was in the state legislature, which did not last a long time, right? Because the moment she became a representative in the House in Texas, subsequently, we're talking about 10 months later, a new opportunity opened up. There was a seat that opened up for the 30th district at the federal level, right, for the U.S. House of Representatives. And so she ended up announcing her candidacy for that seat and eventually won it. So her tenure in the House, in the state legislature, was fairly short. But nevertheless, she's somebody who introduced legislation. She's somebody throughout her political career, granted very short one, she's only a sophomore in the U.S. House of Representatives, she has introduced legislation to protect voting rights. Somebody who's going for liberties and freedom. So she's somebody who's not just talking. With also her legal background, she has advocated. So she is certainly an activist. You cannot deny her that. Ibrahim Traore on the other side, same deal. He's somebody who is certainly an activist. Now, granted, he is at a far higher sphere of influence when you compare him to Jasmine Crockett. As a matter of fact, it would be a bit, you can't really compare their sphere of influence, right? Because Traore is the president of a nation. So the buck stops with him, right? In terms of the direction of an entire nation. Jasmine Crockett has a sphere of influence, but a much lower, granted. It's within a legislative body. She's not a president, so she can only affect change to a certain extent. Are they catalysts? All right, so in a literal term, a catalyst is somebody or a substance that speeds up chemical reaction. So when we talk about social change, alliances and so on, are Jasmine Crockett and Ibrahim Traore people who speed up the reaction or speed up or create condition that can speed up that change from occurring? In the case of Ibrahim Traore, most certainly. I mean, he created conditions where he kicked out a lot of troops from France out of his country. He created an alliance with his neighbors of the countries of Mali and Niger. They created an alliance called the Alliance of the Countries of Sahel. He is advocating for change. He is creating an environment where he is advancing the cause of panafricanism. So certainly a catalyst. Jasmine Crockett, the same. Within her sphere of influence, now she's only a sophomore in the House of Representatives. She's very new in that legislative body. But you cannot deny that her sphere of influence is growing by the day. Through her speeches, through her activism, through what she's standing for, she is certainly participating in creating an environment that would help catalyze change. Again, you cannot deny them that. So a comment I would make here is that, look, I think that whether it's Jasmine Crockett, whether it's Ibrahim Traore, whether it's you who's watching me or even me, life will often put us in the face of opportunities. Those could be inflection points. And so it is up to us to rise up to the moment and then seize that opportunity and turn that into life-defining moment. But all of us, even if you look back in your life, we're constantly faced with situations that can become opportunities. Now, granted, you have to be in a certain arena. You have to be even prepared to recognize that moment and then rise up and seize it. Now, the one thing that will help you in those moments, because you don't always know the outcome, right? Like nobody can predict the future. So you do not know for a fact what will come out of certain choices that you make. You do not know that. So the one thing you need to stand up on, or stand up on your 10 toes, like Jasmine Crockett is saying, you need to know what your values are. What are your values? What is your value system? And you also need to have clarity into what you want out of life. When those two things are clear in your life, you know what your values are, you know what you want ultimately out of life, then when you face situations such as that, you will understand what it takes for you to rise up, you will seize it, and it will help advance what you're seeking. So Ibrahim Traore, I think, and Jasmine Crockett are people who were able to rise up to the moment. I'm sure a few years back, if you asked Jasmine Crockett whether or not she would become a state legislator, she would probably say no, she does not want to become a politician. She's not seeking to be this person who's growing to become a symbol for so many people. Ibrahim Traore, the same. If you ask him 10 years ago, I'm pretty sure he would tell you that being a president is not something that he's even working towards. But as they face challenges, in the case of Ibrahim Traore, he saw that there is a system where he was in combat. He's a true combat soldier. He saw that the system that we're seeking to reform was deeply ingrained. And the people that he was supporting were actually lining up with the predatory system. So he took matters into his own hand, and he stepped up to the plate. He seized the moment. Jasmine Crockett the same. The mayor of Dallas steps down because to run to become mayor. Here's an opportunity to run for office. She seizes the moment, and the rest is history. So it is important in our lives to recognize that. And Jasmine Crockett and Ibrahim Traore are people who seize the moment, and gradually it has allowed them to step up, to grow up, to become these figures that today are a beacon for so many people, beacon of change, right? In a political arena. I mean, it's kind of like the expression says, right? Ideas take a life of their own. You look, you start with something, maybe your scope is limited, but then once that idea is out there or that symbol is out there, then it becomes much bigger than what you even expected and anticipated. That is what's happening clearly with President Captain Ibrahim Traore and U.S. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. I would call them activists. They are the new age activists. They have real power to enact change. And I believe that when you see a flame, like picture this, right? If you are in an environment that's cold or it's dark, there's not a lot of light, and then there's a fire, you come across a fire, the last thing you will want to do is to pour water over that fire. No. You will ensure that the fire is lasting so that it warms you or it provides light. And as opposed to throwing water over it, as opposed to dampening it, you'll do everything possible to add combustible into the fire so the fire becomes bigger or at least is sustained. So for those who want the sort of change in terms of fight for social equality and so on, people like Traore and Jasmine Crockett, they symbolize the certain aspiration. And whether or not the tactics are something that we agree with or not, the last thing we should be doing is to try to dampen that flame. But do everything we can to ensure that we maximize the reach. And I was talking about they are new age activists. They have real power to change, to enact change. Because look, you can talk all you want. Remember, one thing I often say on this platform is that money talks and BS walks. Right? So you need certain things to enact change, and money is one of those things. And there's even the African saying that says that a golden key opens all doors. So finances and money is needed. But the other thing is you need political power. Because the system that we recognize as oppressive systems that started being put in place hundreds of years in some instances, how were they put in place? They were put in place through laws, right? Through laws that regulate societies. So if you want to enact change, you need to be in a position to advocate or impose new laws. So you need to be in the arena that allows laws to change. Because being out in the street and being an activist is one thing. You can gain popularity, you can gain name recognition and so on. But that needs to translate in true political power. And the reality is Jasmine Crockett and Ibrahim Traore are in a position where they have that political power. Ibrahim Traore, that goes without saying. Again, the buck stops with him. He's the president of a nation. Jasmine Crockett is in a body that can advocate for new laws that would attack the oppressive system that we want to attack. I mean, that's a known fact. Even Martin Luther King Jr. had mentioned it many times during the civil rights movements. It's like you need money, so you need resources, and you need to be able to change laws. So whatever action you have has to have an outlet where it affects the lawmaking arena, the lawmaking environment. Now, granted, Malcolm X advocated for advocated for. I apologize here. There's a bit of a problem. Okay, so Martin Luther King advocated for rebelling or resisting unjust laws, right? So, yes, we have to get to a point where we enact change through legislation. Nevertheless, when the laws are clearly unjust, it is okay to resist, to disobey. Civil disobedience is about resisting unjust laws so that eventually you get to the point where it becomes clear to all that those laws are unjust, and so you advocate for change, right? So that's something certainly Dr. Martin Luther King was advocating for and mentioned. But as I say, I mean, Jasmine Crockett, I mean, she's a sophomore politician, right? She's gradually gaining clout. She still has ways to go in those hierarchical legislative bodies that have heavy traditions. When you're the new kid on the block, it takes some time for you to rise up, right, to the top. And she will get there. But to me, the biggest reason why I see them as catalysts of change, like really one of the biggest reasons, given the mission of this platform, our mission being, the Global PAC mission, Global Pan-African Coalition, Global Pan-African Communities, where we work to build coalitions and build bridges across different Pan-African communities in the greater Pan-African diaspora, Africa, Caribbean, Latin America, the United States with African American community. The reason why I really see her and Ibrahim Traore as great catalysts of change is because they are breaking barriers to coalitions across different global PAC communities. Because when you look at their constituencies or people that are openly supporting these two, you're clearly seeing a diversity of communities. In the case of Ibrahim Traore, you're seeing great support in his native Burkina Faso. You're seeing great support outside of Burkina Faso on the African continent from different countries, going from South Africa, Nigeria, Tanzania, Congo, Kenya, Ghana, etc. You're seeing great support for him within African American communities. You're seeing great support for him in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, you name it. You're seeing great support for Ibrahim Traore in Latin American countries. So they are breaking barriers for communities across the global PAC to be able to unite and form coalitions. They're creating that environment. Jasmine Crockett is the same. She has a lot of detractors granted in the United States, even within some African American communities, but she has great support outside of the United States. Just looking at the comments on the last video I made, you're seeing people from Puerto Rico, people from Jamaica, people from some African countries, people that are standing on their 10 toes for Jasmine Crockett. So to me, that is one of the greatest reasons why I see them as true catalysts of change. Because for those who believe that it is not possible for descendants of African, right, from the greater African diaspora to coalesce or come in coalitions and work together, they're creating an environment where there is unity. There's at least communication and collaboration. So that is fantastic. Now, if you recall a quote I said sometimes last week, it was a quote from Ford, the one who founded the Ford car company. There's a quote that I like that said, coming together is the beginning. Staying together is progress, and working together is success. Ultimately, we want to succeed. So we want to be in a place where our mission, which is to build bridges and coalitions, we can actually build true coalitions that allow us to work together in the long term. That is true success. And again, Ibrahim Traore and Jasmine Crockett, by virtue of the symbols that they're becoming, they're breaking those barriers, or at least going towards mitigating some of those barriers that prevented people from different Pan-African communities, different global PAC communities to work together. So that is fantastic. Because, at the end of the day, when I talk about coalitions, you have to understand that coalitions does not mean that we don't have differences. The essence of a coalition is to understand that we have different beliefs. We understand that. However, we decide to look beyond those differences and decide to work together towards identifying common causes. That is what a coalition is. So when I talk about global Pan-African coalitions, within global Pan-African communities, the greater, Pan-African diaspora, the great diaspora across the world, including also people on the African continent. When I talk about coalitions, it doesn't mean that it's a unity of culture. Absolutely not. There's definitely different cultures. That's understand. We understand that. All right. But it's understanding that despite those cultural differences, despite our belief differences, we can still decide to overlook that, or at least not use that as a barrier to us working together, but rather still put our heads together and identify common causes. All right. And then when we've identified causes that are impactful and influential to all of us, right, that are meaningful to all of us, then we bring our heads together, we bring our resources together, and we agree to use our collective influence and power to attack those problems in a common block. All right. Because again, the outcome of that, a successful outcome, would benefit all of us. In other words, the tide will rise for all of us. That is what a coalition is. And it is absolutely possible, brothers and sisters. No need to keep hammering on our differences to divide us. And on that point, I think there's a major misunderstanding on the necessity of unity within different Black people around the world. Like, I truly believe that. There's a misunderstanding of the necessity and the importance of working in unity and in coalitions. And that's across, as I say, different global PAC communities, whether it's African on the continents, African American in the Caribbean, Black Afro communities in Latin America. As a matter of fact, let me do this. Let me do this quickly. If you go on the on the channel, right? So I think you should be able to see this. I highly recommend, on this subject of unity, on the subject of us working together in a coalition, and that being absolutely possible, I highly recommend these three videos that you see here. Okay, so if you go on our YouTube channel, so these videos were done under AfriKili. So these are produced videos. So these are not live videos. When I used to do produced videos, like researched a bit more with a bit more production and so on. These three videos, you'll find them. So I did a series on unity, 3 videos. There's Unity Part 1, Unity Part 2, and Unity Part 3 here. All right, so for Unity Part 1, it was around the Tyree Nichols situation, where I said, okay, so should Black lives matter to all Black people around the world? So in other words, should global PAC communities in Africa care about global PAC communities in the United States, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, vice versa? So I did a whole video about that. And the conclusion was a resounding yes. And I provide examples to showcase that, look, a lot of this system of oppression that we want to eliminate once and for all are not designed to have categories between different Black people in whatever environment you are. And I give example, for example, of how myself within the United States, I faced situations where I was racially profiled by virtue of just having a Black skin. So if we keep on hammering this cultural distinction between us and say we're too different to work together, and we decide not to form coalitions, that goes, it's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Because those systems, we need to attack them together because they definitely classify us as just one race, so to speak. All right. And then the second video that I did here was the eternal link between African and the global Pan-African diaspora. I prove and showcase how the links are there and have always been there through numerous examples. The last video was about building bridges and coalitions, and partnering in the global P.A.C. And I talked about a bit more business and so on, because obviously one of the pillars of this platform is business, right? Global Pan-African business. In case you're new to this platform, the mission vision typically surrounds on three pillars. We have Pan-African history, Pan-African business, and Pan-African political action. So history being important because we all need to know our history, whatever part of the global P.A.C. in which we are, we need to know our history so that we avoid repeating mistakes of the past as we build a better future. Pan-African business, we need to highlight success story and we need to create condition, build coalitions around businesses so that we can reinforce and build the financial muscle of our communities, because you will need financial muscle if you want to enact change and even if you want to participate in the political arena. And then the third pillar is Pan-African political action. We need coalitions around that. As I mentioned, Jasmine Crockett can have an influence because she's part of a legislative body. She can advocate for change. Ibrahim Traore, the buck stops with him. He obviously has heavy impact on the political system. So I highly recommend these three videos. Like really, if you go on the YouTube channel. If you're familiar with the navigation, typically on YouTube you have section that says live, section that say videos. If you click under the video, you will see all the videos that we've made. There's some videos about Robert Smith, the billionaire African American, and so on. And then if you click on live, is where you will find all these live shows and past. So I wanted to just take a moment to mention that. But again, this is really about how building coalitions, it is absolutely possible, brothers and sisters. Don't let anybody fool you. Cultural differences should never actually prevent people from working together. And I think the older generation actually understood that also very well. I'm talking about people like Malcolm X, Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, right, who was educated in the U.S., went back to Africa, became the president of Ghana, one of the great proponents of Pan-Africanism. He was advocating for United States of Africa. He invited people like Malcolm X. Malcolm X was invited to Ghana, invited in Ghana by Kwame Nkrumah. He invited Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois died in Ghana. He relocated to Ghana from the United States, being the first African American to obtain a PhD from Harvard University. You have people like Maya Angelou. You had Aimé Césaire. So older generation already understood that unity is needed across global Pan-African community of people of African descent, African heritage people, like Malcolm X would call them, right? As a matter of fact, just how much time do we have? 33 minutes. I have some quote here on one of this book. I just love this book, right? The autobiography of Malcolm X. Let me just quote you some things to prove to you or show you that even Malcolm X understood that unity amongst Black people, not only in the United States, but across the world, was necessary. So if you go into chapter 18, right? This chapter is called El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. So this is after Malcolm X finally left the United States. He came out of jail and left the United States. He went to the Mecca on a pilgrimage. His eyes opened up because for the first time he saw people like different races praying and coming together in unity, something he thought was impossible with his upbringing in the United States that was heavily segregated. And so that trip outside of America, going through Africa, going through the Middle East, just opened up his eyes. Working in unity with white people, Arabic people, African people from different origin. So Malcolm X, if you go in chapter 18 here. I'm going to read you just a quick quote, okay, from Malcolm X from that book. So the quote here, he says this. This is about unity, because you might say I'm delusional. Malcolm X never believed in unity of the different black community, different black people. Here's what he said. He says, I think the single worst mistake of the American black organizations and their leaders is that they have failed to establish direct brotherhood lines of communication between the independent nations of Africa and the American people. He didn't say many. He said the single worst mistake of the American black organization. Again, the single worst mistake of the American black organizations and their leaders is that they have failed to establish direct brotherhood lines of communication between the independent nations of Africa and the American black people. Obviously, Malcolm X, his word is not, like the Bible or anything like that, or the Quran. It's his opinion, granted. But we can all agree, somebody who, especially towards the end, it was very measured. And he's definitely somebody who grew up to be a great intellectual and definitely a great fighter for the freedom of African Americans and black people within the United States. And he continues saying, still in that chapter, right? This is very fascinating. He said, the world's course will change the day the African heritage peoples come together as brother. This is amazing. I mean, Malcolm X, he's saying that the world's course will change. So the direction of the world will change. He's not talking about just African Americans. He's talking about the entire world. He's saying the direction of the world will change the day the African heritage people come together as brothers. I mean, isn't that our mission on this platform? The global PAC, the global Pan-African community. We want to build bridges, coalitions within the global Pan-African diaspora. Because again, our cultural differences are a reality. When you've grown apart in hundreds of years, we're separated hundreds of years, many of us, and then we end up creating new identities and cultures in different parts of the world. That's a given. But we still have a fiber that connects us. And also, we faced seriously oppressive systems that were implemented not only in the United States, not only in the Caribbean, not only in Latin America, but in Africa as well. And those systems that were implemented over centuries are deeply rooted, explicitly and implicitly, in the subconscious of people as well. It takes a concerted effort for us to be able to reform that. I mean, that is clear as day. So division does not serve any purpose. I came across something. I'll just be honest with you. I actually did not know about that. My mistake. It's FBA, so Foundational Black Americans. Because I was looking at some of the comments that people left and messages I received regarding Jasmine Crockett. You have a lot of people, black people, that are hammering her. She's doing nothing for us in the FBA, Foundational Black Americans. And I'm like, wait a minute, man. Like, here we are again. So, and I saw comments about people saying, why should us in the FBA care about Africa and other black communities? So FBA, and I went and researched, so Foundational Black Africans is this movement that was created that says that, so you are an FBA, Foundational Black American, if you can trace your lineage all the way to slavery, right? So if you're a black person of immigrant descent, you're not a Foundational Black American. So if you can't identify your lineage to slavery through the last census, was it the 1870 census? I can't remember the year, because there was a census that was done after the once slavery was abolished. I think it was 1870, if I'm not mistaken. Then there was a census. So if you can trace your heritage to that, then you're an FBA, Foundational Black American. And I couldn't believe some of the divisions that I saw. Now, you are entitled to create any group you want, any movement you want. Nobody has to tell you how to live your life. Your beliefs are your beliefs. And I don't even fault that people say, okay, there's a certain cultural movement that we want to create. That is okay. However, it's different when you start saying that because we are this group of Black people, we don't want anything to do with the other groups of Black people. We don't want anything to do with Africa, for example. I just show you how people like Malcolm X and others were seeing how unity was a strength as opposed to creating that separation. As a matter of fact, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, when he was going through some severe bout of depression, he went to Ghana. That gave him so much energy. So when he came and he gave that speech that I've been to the mountaintop, people don't know that speech, that powerful speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was inspired by his visit to Ghana, right? Malcolm X, from his mouth, he said that he and Kwame Nkrumah agreed that Pan-Africanism would offer solutions to the problems of Black people around the world. African heritage people, as they used to say. So this Pan-African ideology is a very powerful tool if we can really wrap our minds around that. The FBA movement, I want to be clear, I have nothing wrong with the desire to create that movement. It is fine. There's a reality, there's a culture that came out of enslaved brothers and sisters that freed themselves. There's a lot of there's a history of fights that often is left out of the history book. So I appreciate, because one of the pillars of this platform again is Pan-African history as well. So that historical piece is fantastic. Going beyond Nat Turner, talking about, they want to put an emphasis on the many like slave revolts beyond just Nat Turner and so on. So that is awesome. But no, to see comments saying, Jasmine Crockett does nothing for us, the FBA, because one of the main causes of the FBA is fighting for reparations, for example, and things of that nature. So it's okay, but let's not use that as a reason for not wanting to come together and work together. To what end? Like, do you really think that it is just by having a small movement without any, say, political inclination or even like influence on a legislative body that true change will happen? Oh, you can dream about it. That will never happen, because the change that we seek have to happen eventually through laws, and you need critical mass for that to happen. And you also fighting situation that not only affect the FBA, but affect all Black people in the United States. So unity is needed. All right. So really, that's my message. And for the FBA brothers and sisters that say that, why should they care about Africa? Because other Black communities and Africans don't really care about them, the foundational Black Americans. I'd say, I don't know where you get your information from. There's a plethora of literature out there, like this book, for example, right? Africa Must Unite by Kwame Nkrumah, who I just mentioned. Kwame Nkrumah, Osegiafo, which means chief, who was advocating for Pan-African unity, a United States of Africa, who was educated in the United States, very involved in the fight for the freedom of Black people in the U.S., and then went back to Africa. When he became the first president of Ghana, I just said, what did he do? He invited MLK, he invited Malcolm X. He hosted Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, gave him everything he needed until he unfortunately died in Ghana. He was buried in Ghana. Kwame Nkrumah constantly spoke about the need for a constant connection between Black people around the world as we fight towards a more unified world. So that is really something, my FBA brothers and sisters, I have no ill thought, but it's just that division part. It's like, no, thrive to look beyond that. All right. Your connection to Africa is not a problem. I never see people of European descent wanting to reject their European lineage, right? Like, in the United States, I hear that often. I am Italian American. I'm, German American. I'm Polish American. I mean, somebody will even tell you I'm Sicilian American. You're like, for real? Where were you born? I was born in New York City. Okay. And you're Sicilian American? Have you ever been to Sicily? No. Okay. So somebody will tell you he's Sicilian American and does not even speak a lick of Italian, right? But be proud to be Sicilian American. Not only does not even speak any Italian, has never even been to Italy, but very proud to say I'm Sicilian American. Somebody say I'm Polish American, and so on and so forth. Like, okay, I never really come across somebody who has a problem with that association with his ancestry in Europe. When it comes to Africa, I see this like our FBA movement here. Many brothers and sisters say no, they don't want the association with African. I'm not African. Okay. No matter how you slice it, you're of African ancestry. Just like all white people here of European ancestry. That does not necessarily mean you're European or you're African. I get it, right? Because your ancestors came into America, obviously not by will, but ended up creating a thriving culture out of it, out of the pain and despair. Our brothers and sisters in America showcase fantastic, phenomenal strength. We're not broken. Continued fighting for freedom, all the way to later on to the civil rights movement and to this day. That is phenomenal strength. Our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, same thing. We have brothers and sisters in Haiti, who became the first Black republic. In Africa, we had colonization, which was just as devastating. Africans fought for their freedoms and independence, right? So different cultures in different places, I get it. But let's definitely not use that for a division. So our anecdote. Oh, the other thing is when we talk about these coalitions and the need to fight oppressive systems, it is important to go beyond our anecdotal situation, because you will find some Black people that are doing very well, that are very successful, that maybe have never directly felt the weight of an oppressive or systematic racist system. On the flip side, you will find some white people who are in extreme poverty and are really struggling to make by, right? Really suffering from poverty. So when we talk about this social justice and equality, fighting the oppressive system, it is beyond just our anecdotal situations. You have to go above that, because when you look at it at a macro level, you cannot dispute the fact that there are some clear imbalances associated with racial ethnicities, and so those are the imbalances we're targeting. Now, on top of those racial systemic systems, there are poverty issues that are also a real factor in, unfortunately, in our society, because our intense capitalistic system has created a big class of have and have-nots. There's like inequalities there as well, and the have-nots include not only Black people today, so people of all the ethnicities, right? So on top of the racial social justice movement, you also have now issues of poverty that are very real. Nevertheless, what we're saying is that the racial issues were never truly addressed, because those were implemented by policies and laws that were ingrained in our societies over hundreds of years. Those actually created some unjust advantages. And when you look at it at a macro level, today, a lot of the outcomes that we have are a result of that. And poverty comes and compounds the problem. Because even some of the violence and crime that we see today, it's really at its core poverty. But that's also not forgetting that we had racial oppressive systems. So it's a complicated situation, but we need unity to be able to address that. Now, I will finish by saying, I mentioned, Black people, but let's be frank about one thing. This is not the Global Pack is not a racist movement and never will be. If you follow this platform, you know me. I believe in the brotherhood of all men and women. I couldn't care any less that you're white, that you're black, that you're Asian, that you're Indian. Like, you're human, you're human. As such, I have no problem with associating and collaborating with people of all ethnicities. Let that be clear. During the civil rights movement, you had a lot of white people that marched for equalities, that did sit-ins, for the schools to be desegregated or integrated. During the abolitionist movement, you also had white people that participated. We have to recognize that. For Africa, like the anti-colonization movement, you had white people participating. So let's also always reject racism. To me, as I said a few days ago, racism is the most idiotic thing in my opinion. Because of economic reasons, hundreds of years ago, through the church and others, people started creating this ideology as to where, people with black skins are inferior, don't have a soul. And so created societies around that because you needed to take advantage of black people to create your wealth. Which is total fallacy. But that is so ingrained in the mind of people that people believe that the color of your skin gives you some inherent advantages or not, which is bonkers. All right, so racism is like one of the biggest idiotic thing in my opinion. I cannot even understand, honestly, in the age of science and so on, how people still believe that because you're black, you're inferior, and because you're white, you're superior. I mean, that is crazy. And even back to Jasmine Crockett, I hear somebody like Donald Trump saying, "Oh, she's such a low IQ individual." How do you know, Donald Trump? How do you know that Jasmine Crockett is low IQ? Did you see her test? I'm willing to bet that if you and her did an IQ test, you might not. Hey, who knows? Maybe she's more, right? Who knows that? But you have these tropes. You see a black person and so you start accusing them of being low IQ. How do you know that? How in the world? How in the hell do you know that? Right? So anyways, it's idiotic. On that note, I just want to conclude. This is going to be my last quote of Malcolm X. Because Malcolm X, I think, is often painted as a very racist person, right? Who just didn't like white people and just attack white people. When he started, he was very vociferous against white people because he didn't know any better. But as he traveled, his views dramatically evolved throughout the end of his life. And he actually became very open to other, racial ethnic groups. So still in chapter 19 of the autobiography of Malcolm X, still the same chapter, right? Titled El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. Here's what Malcolm X says. He says, talking about the evolution of his understanding of collaborating with white people and so on. He says, in the past, yes, I have made sweeping indictments of all white people. I never will be guilty of that again, as I know now that some white people are truly sincere, that some truly are capable of being brotherly towards a black man. And then he said, yes, I have been convinced that some American whites do want to help cure the rampant racism which is on the path to destroying this country. A blanket indictment on all white people is as wrong as when whites make a blanket indictment against black. I mean, can it be any clearer? Just the beginning of that quote, right? I have made sweeping indictments of all white people. I will never be guilty of that again. So talking about the evolution of the man, which is a beautiful thing. And this also talks about conditioning here, right? How when we have a narrow mind because the only reality we know is the society in which we are. So clearly the realities of that society will impact and condition our minds. But it is important sometimes to travel, which is why even Malcolm X was advocating for other black people, other leaders to travel outside of the United States. And I would say the same to many of the leaders in the Caribbean or in Africa. Sometimes you have misconceptions about Black people in other parts. It is important to establish connections. Today with social media and so on, it's easy to follow what's happening in other parts of the world. But when you do that, you can only come to the conclusion that it is foolish to make a blank indictment on any racial group. That's why when I hear somebody come and tells me Black people are this or all Black people are this, I'm like, okay, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. You start to make a blank indictment on like, there's no one group that's a monolith. Or if you come and tell me all white people are racist, all white people are this, I'm like, okay, you've lost me. You cannot. There's no blanket statement that you'll make about all individuals of one skin color. You'll find both good and bad in all skin colors. I'm sorry, you'll find bad people within Black communities. You'll find good people within Black communities. You'll find bad people within white communities. You'll find bad people within good people within white communities. The same applies with any, racial ethnic group. So we need to be able to look beyond that. All right, beyond that. All right, I've gone on for a while, so I'm going to conclude here. So in conclusion, really, we started with the question posed, for whether or not Jasmine Crockett and Ibrahim Traore were just a product of propaganda, social media propaganda, or they had true substance of change. I would say clearly the answer is they are activists and agents of change. The propaganda piece is a reality. We cannot discount that. By propaganda, I mean, like, look at the social media propagation that's happening. You have people around the world who's never been to Burkina Faso, cannot even locate Burkina Faso on a map, yet they're fans of Traore. How is that? Social media propaganda. We have to recognize that, some countries like Russia and so on are kind of trying to, stick it to the West by also pushing that pan-Africanist, agenda because Russia is an expert in social media. We understand that. We understand that Jasmine Crockett, a lot of her fame is associated also with social media and so on. So the element of social media is a reality, but that's not all. That's not all. On top of the propaganda in the social media arena, they also have some substantive revolutionary messaging, some activist messaging, which is tangible and substantive. So that makes them some true agents of change. And as I said, they are destroying the barriers that made it hard for people to work together, come together across different global P.A.C communities. So they are catalysts, in my opinion. They are fires that we need to continue flaming. And when we see a fire that's burning like that, we cannot afford to pour water over it. Quite to the contrary, we need to continue supporting it and throwing combustible in that fire so that the flame of Ibrahim Traore and the flame of Jasmine Crockett will continue burning hotter and bigger, even though the tactics we might not necessarily agree with their tactics, but they're such catalysts that will impact the lives of us, and by diminishing the barriers or eliminating the barriers in the global P.A.C communities, by showing how it's possible to unite regardless of where you are within Black communities, they are helping create conditions that will allow all of us to create strong coalitions, work together towards the changes that we want to see happen ultimately in this society. To end up, I will end up with a quote, as has become the norm on our platform. The quote I will use today is from none other than Osie Gyafo, Kwame Nkrumah. And he says, "The forces that unite us are intrinsic and greater than the superimposed influences that keep us apart." The forces that unite us are intrinsic. Connections are there. I showed you a series of Unity video that I made. Go watch that if you have the time. I will appreciate the support. But I agree with what Kwame Nkrumah is saying, right? The forces that unite us are intrinsic. More than the superimposed influences that try to keep us apart. Divide and conquer has worked within our communities for a long time. We should not let that continue being an influence within our communities. Let's unite, let's unite, let's unite. Jasmine Crockett and Ibrahim Traore are great catalysts. And we need to continue forming strong coalitions and building bridges within the global Pan-African communities. Thank you very much for your support. Before closing, let me ask you, if you've not done so, please take a moment, click on the subscribe button. Only takes a second, but it helps this platform grow and it helps us meet our objective, and it allows you to become part of this community, this growing community. If you like the content, please consider sharing it. It's very simple. You just click on share and send it to the people in your network so that we can propagate the message and we can also continue helping the community grow. If you're already a supporter, thank you very much for that. On that note, as I close, remember, as I like to say, we are a beautiful people. We are a strong people. We are a special people. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. And more importantly, we are the Global PAC. Until next time, this was Tony Fumusimba Kwambamba Ngumbu. Peace be with you. Asante sana, which means thank you very much in Swahili. And once again, we are the Global PAC. Thank you very much and see you next time.